I saw my daughter-in-law push a heavy wooden chest into the river and then speed away. I ran to the water's edge and thought I heard a faint cry coming from inside it. "Oh, Lord, please don't let it be what I think it is," I prayed, my whole body trembling as I waded into the freezing water. I hooked my fingers under the lid, forced it open with all my might, and my blood ran cold. What I saw inside made my soul shatter into a million pieces. But let me take you back to the beginning, to explain how a peaceful afternoon in late September turned into the most horrifying moment of my life. If you want to hear how this nightmare unfolded, make sure you're following my page, because I tell a new story every single day. It was just after 4:30 in the afternoon. I remember because I had just refilled my coffee mug and glanced at the old cuckoo clock my husband George had bought for me. I was sitting in my sunroom, the very room where I had raised my only son, David. The house feels so empty now, so cavernous and full of memories since we lost him 7 months ago. Willow Creek flowed right past my backyard, calm and green under the Oregon sky. It was a crisp day, the kind where the autumn air has a bite to it, even in the sun. That's when I saw her. Veronica's dark blue sedan came barreling down the gravel path that leads to the riverbank, kicking up stones and dirt. My daughter-in-law, my son's widow. She was driving like a bat out of hell. The engine whined in a way that made my teeth ache. Something was terribly wrong. I knew that path. David and I used to skip stones there when he was just a little boy. Nobody drives on it like that unless they're running from something awful. She slammed on the brakes right at the edge of the creek. The tires screeched against the gravel. I dropped my coffee mug. It shattered on the tiled floor, but I didn't even flinch. My eyes were locked on her. Veronica scrambled out of the car like she was on fire. She was wearing a simple black dress, the one David bought her for her last birthday. Her dark hair was a tangled mess. Her face was flushed, splotchy, like she'd been screaming for hours. She wrenched the trunk open with so much force I heard the metal groan. And then I saw it. The chest. That old, dark pine chest I gave them as a wedding gift. "To store all your beautiful memories," I'd told her that day. What a fool I was. What a blind, trusting fool. Veronica hauled it out of the trunk. It was heavy. I could see it in the way her back bowed, the way her arms strained against the weight. She darted her eyes around, frantic, cornered, guilty. I will never forget the look on her face. Then she started dragging it toward the water. Each step was a battle, as if she were dragging the weight of all her sins behind her. "Veronica!" I yelled from the sunroom, but my voice was lost to the wind. Or maybe she just chose not to hear it. She gave the chest a mighty shove. It slid down the muddy bank and hit the water with a sickening splash that echoed in the quiet afternoon. A flock of birds burst from the trees. She just stood there, panting, watching as the chest bobbed for a moment before it started to sink below the surface. Then she bolted, scrambling back to her car like a demon was on her heels. The engine screamed back to life. The tires spun, spitting gravel. And then she was gone. Vanished down the path, leaving behind nothing but settling dust and a deafening silence. I was frozen. 10 seconds, 20, maybe a full minute passed. My mind couldn't catch up with what my eyes had just seen. Veronica, the chest, the river, the sheer desperation in her every move. Something was horribly, terribly wrong. An icy dread crawled up my spine, colder than the autumn air. My legs were moving before I even told them to. I ran. I ran harder than I had in 20 years. My old knees screamed in protest. My lungs burned. But I didn't care. I flew down the back steps, across the damp lawn, and onto the gravel path. My slippers were no match for the sharp stones. The river was only 50 yards away. Maybe less. I don't know. I just knew that every passing second was an eternity. By the time I reached the bank, I was gasping for air, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The chest was still visible, just below the surface, sinking slowly into the murky green. The dark wood was slick with water, heavy with its terrible secret. I plunged into the creek without a moment's hesitation. The water was shockingly cold, a frigid shock that stole my breath. It came up to my thighs, then my waist. The silty bottom tried to steal my slippers. I reached out with shaking hands. I grabbed the edge of the chest. I pulled. It was impossibly heavy, like it was filled with lead weights or something far worse. I refused to let my mind imagine what could be worse. I dug my heels into the mud and pulled again. My muscles screamed. The cold water numbed my hands. Finally, the chest scraped against the riverbed. I started to drag it, inch by painful inch, toward the shore. And that's when I heard it. A sound. So faint, so muffled coming from inside. My blood turned to ice. No, it wasn't possible. Dear God, please no. I pulled with a new frantic strength. I heaved the chest onto the muddy bank, collapsing onto my knees beside it. My fingers scrabbled at the wet, rusted latch. It was jammed shut. My hands kept slipping on the slick wood. Open, 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 I grunted through clenched teeth. Tears of frustration and terror blurred my vision. I found a rock and hammered at the latch, once, twice. It finally gave way with a splintering crack. I threw the lid open, and what I saw inside made my world stop turning. My heart stopped beating. The air vanished from my lungs. My hands flew to my mouth to hold back a scream that was tearing its way up my throat. There, wrapped in a soaked gray towel, was a baby. A newborn, so tiny, so fragile, so utterly still. His lips were a terrifying shade of blue. His skin was ashen. His eyes were closed. He wasn't moving. Oh, dear God. No, no. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely touch him. I lifted him from the chest with a tenderness I thought I'd lost forever. He was cold, so terribly cold. He weighed almost nothing. His little head rested in the palm of my hand. His umbilical cord was still attached, tied off with a dirty shoelace. A shoelace, not a proper medical clamp. A simple, knotted shoelace. As if someone had done this in a dark room, all alone. No, 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 I whispered, rocking him back and forth. I pressed my ear to his tiny chest. I heard nothing. Silence. I pressed my cheek to his nose, desperate for any sign. And then I felt it. A tiny puff of air, so faint I thought I'd imagined it. But it was there. He was breathing, barely alive, but alive. I scrambled to my feet, clutching the baby to my chest. My legs were like jelly. I ran back toward the house faster than I thought my old body could move. Water streamed from my soaked clothes. The sharp gravel cut into my bare feet, but I felt nothing, only a primal urgency, a desperate, all-consuming need to save this tiny, trembling life. I burst through the back door, screaming. I have no idea what I was screaming. Maybe help, maybe my son's name, maybe just raw, wordless terror. I grabbed the kitchen phone with one hand, cradling the baby in the other. I dialed 911. My fingers were stiff and clumsy. 911, what is your emergency? A calm voice on the other end. A baby, I sobbed. I found a baby in the river. He's not breathing right. He's so cold. Please, you have to send help. Ma'am, you need to stay calm. Give me your address. I stammered out my address, the words tumbling over each other. The operator told me to lay the baby on a hard, flat surface. I swept everything off the kitchen table with one swipe of my arm. Cookbooks, mail, the salt and pepper shakers. It all crashed to the floor. None of it mattered. I laid the baby on the wooden table. So small. So still. Is he breathing? The operator asked. Her voice was an anchor in my storm of panic. I don't know. My voice was a shrill sound I didn't recognize. Look closely at his chest, ma'am. Is it rising and falling? I leaned in, my face just inches from his. Barely. A movement so slight it was almost invisible. Yes, I think so, just a little. Okay, ma'am, listen to me. I'm going to talk you through this. I need you to find a dry towel. Dry the baby off completely. Then wrap him in more dry towels to get him warm. The paramedics are on their way. I did exactly as she said. I grabbed towels from the linen closet. I dried his tiny body with frantic, fumbling motions. Every second felt like an hour. I wrapped him in 2 clean, fluffy towels. I picked him up again, holding him close to my body, trying to share my own warmth. I started rocking him, a motion as old as time itself, an instinct I thought I'd long forgotten. You hang on, I whispered into the towels. Please, little one, just hang on. Help is coming. The minutes before the ambulance arrived felt like the longest of my entire life. I sat on the kitchen floor, the baby bundled against my chest. I hummed. I don't know what I hummed. Maybe the lullaby I used to sing to David, maybe just a tuneless sound of comfort. I just needed him to know he wasn't alone anymore. The wail of sirens finally shattered the silence. Red and blue lights flashed across my kitchen walls. I ran to the front door. 2 paramedics came rushing up the walk. A man with a kind, weathered face and a young woman with her hair pulled back in a tight braid. She took the baby from my arms with a gentle but firm efficiency that somehow broke my heart all over again. She unwrapped him, listened to his chest with a stethoscope, her face a mask of concentration. I saw her jaw tighten. Severe hypothermia, bradycardia, she said to her partner. We need to go. Now. They placed him on a tiny stretcher, fitted a minuscule oxygen mask over his face. Their hands were a blur of motion, attaching wires and monitors, things I couldn't comprehend. The man looked at me. You're riding with us. It wasn't a question. I climbed into the back of the ambulance, my wet clothes sticking to the seat. I couldn't take my eyes off the baby, so tiny and lost amidst all the medical equipment. The ambulance sped off, sirens screaming. How did you find him? The female paramedic asked as she worked. In a chest, in the river. I saw someone push it in. Her head snapped up. Her eyes met mine. Then she glanced at her partner. I saw a flicker of something in her expression. Pity, maybe suspicion. Did you see who it was? I opened my mouth, but the name caught in my throat. Veronica. My daughter-in-law. My son's grieving widow. The woman who sobbed at David's funeral like her world had ended. The same woman who had just tried to drown a helpless baby. How could I say it? How could my own mind even believe it? Yes, I finally managed to say. I saw who it was. We reached the county hospital in what felt like seconds. The emergency room doors flew open. A team of doctors and nurses in scrubs descended on the stretcher, shouting medical terms I didn't understand. They whisked the baby away through a set of double doors. I started to follow, but a nurse with gentle eyes stopped me. Ma'am, you need to wait here. They're doing everything they can. We just need to get some information from you. She led me to a sterile waiting room. Beige walls, uncomfortable plastic chairs, the sharp smell of antiseptic. I sat down, shivering uncontrollably. I didn't know if it was from the cold river water or the shock. Probably both. The nurse sat with me. She was older, maybe my age, with kind lines around her eyes. Her name tag read Sandra. I need you to tell me exactly what happened, she said in a soft, steady voice. And so I told her. I told her everything, from the moment Veronica's car appeared to the moment I opened that terrible chest. Sandra took notes on a clipboard, her expression unreadable. When I was done, she let out a long, slow breath. The police are going to want to speak with you, she said. This is attempted murder. Attempted murder. The words hung in the air, heavy and ugly. My daughter-in-law, a murderer. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Sandra placed a warm hand on my arm. You did a very brave thing today. You saved that baby's life. But it didn't feel brave. It felt like I had ripped the cover off of a nightmare, exposing something so dark and twisted that it could never be put back. It felt like the beginning of the end. It was 2 hours before a doctor came out. He was young, with exhaustion etched into the lines around his eyes. "The baby is stable for now," he said, his voice low. "He's in the neonatal intensive care unit. He's suffering from severe hypothermia and has water in his lungs. The next 24 to 48 hours are critical." "Is he going to make it?" I asked, my voice a broken whisper. "It's too early to say," he answered with a heavy honesty. "We're doing everything we can." The police arrived soon after. A woman in a sharp pantsuit, probably in her late 40s, with an air of no-nonsense authority, and a younger uniformed officer who took notes. The woman introduced herself as Detective Miller. Her eyes were sharp and seemed to see more than I wanted them to. They asked me the same questions again and again. I described Veronica's car, the time, the chest, every single detail. Detective Miller watched me with an intensity that made me feel like a suspect. "And you're positive it was your daughter-in-law, Mrs. Gable?" "Completely." "Why would she do something like this?" "I don't know." "Where is she now?" "I don't know." "When was the last time you spoke with her before today?" "A month ago, on the anniversary of my son's death." Detective Miller jotted something down, then exchanged a look with her partner. "We'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement. And I need you to promise me you will not contact Veronica under any circumstances. Do you understand?" I just nodded. What would I even say to her? Why did you try to murder a baby? Why? The officers left. Sandra came back with a warm blanket and a cup of tea. "You should go home, get some dry clothes, try to rest." But I couldn't move. I couldn't leave that baby alone. Not after holding him, not after feeling that tiny, fragile breath against my cheek. I stayed in that waiting room all night. Sandra found me some clean scrubs to wear, a green t-shirt and pants that were far too big for me. I looked in the bathroom mirror and saw a stranger staring back, a woman who had aged a decade in a single afternoon. I didn't sleep a wink. I just sat in that plastic chair and watched the clock on the wall, each tick a painful reminder of the baby fighting for his life in a room nearby. At 2 a.m, my pastor, Reverend Michael, showed up. Someone from our church must have called him. He sat with me in the quiet waiting room. He didn't offer empty platitudes or easy answers. He just sat there, a silent, comforting presence. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," he said after a long while. "This doesn't feel mysterious," I replied, my voice hoarse. "It feels evil." He simply nodded, and I was grateful that he didn't argue. As the first light of dawn filtered through the windows, I knew that my life had been irrevocably changed. I had seen something I could never unsee, and whatever happened next, I would have to face it. Because that tiny baby, that little soul fighting for every breath, had somehow become my responsibility. I hadn't asked for it, but I couldn't turn my back on him. Not now. The sun rose without me noticing. The pale morning light filled the waiting room. My back ached from the plastic chair. My eyes felt like they were full of sand, but I couldn't leave him. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that dark chest sinking into the green water. I saw that tiny, still body. Sandra appeared at 7 a.m. with coffee and a wrapped breakfast burrito. "You have to eat," she said, pressing it into my hands. I wasn't hungry, but I ate it anyway, because her kind eyes told me she wouldn't leave until I did. The coffee was bitter, the burrito tasteless, but I chewed and swallowed, pretending to be a normal person. "He's still stable," Sandra said, sitting beside me. "His core temperature is slowly coming up. The doctors say that's a good sign. Can I see him?" She shook her head gently. "Not yet. Only immediate family. And right now, we don't know who his family is." Family. The word felt like a punch to the gut. That baby had a mother. Veronica. A mother who tried to kill him. But who was his father? Where was he? Why had no one reported a missing baby? The questions swirled in my exhausted mind. At 9 a.m., Detective Miller returned, alone this time. She carried a thin file folder and sat across from me. Her expression was even harder than before. She looked at me not with sympathy, but with suspicion. "Margaret, I need to ask you some more questions," she began. "I told you everything I know. I'm sure you believe you did, but there are some inconsistencies." Inconsistencies? The word hung between us like a threat. My stomach clenched. What inconsistencies? Detective Miller slid a photograph across the small table. It was Veronica's car, the same dark blue sedan, but it was parked in a brightly lit parking garage. "This was taken by a security camera at a shopping mall 40 miles from your home. The timestamp is 4:45 p.m. yesterday." 4:45 p.m., 15 minutes after I saw her at the river. It was impossible. I stared at the photo. It was her car, her license plate. "That can't be right," I said, my voice shaking. "There's a mistake. I saw her. I was right there." "How close were you, Margaret? 100 yards? From your sunroom?" I swallowed hard. "Maybe. I saw her from the back mostly. The black dress, the dark hair, the car. It was her." My voice lacked the conviction it had before. Detective Miller leaned in, her eyes boring into mine. "Margaret, I need you to be honest with me. What's your relationship with your daughter-in-law? Did you two get along?" And there it was. The question I knew was coming. Because we didn't. We never had. From the day David brought her home, I felt something was off. She was too polished, too cold, too interested in the successful architecture firm David was building. "We weren't close," I admitted. "Do you blame her for your son's death?" "What?" The question was a slap in the face. "It's a straightforward question, Margaret. The accident. David was driving home from a late meeting. It was raining hard. His car hydroplaned and hit an oak tree. He died instantly. The police said it was just a tragic accident, but it had always felt wrong to me. Too sudden, too convenient. But I had no proof, just the desperate ache of a mother's heart." "What does that have to do with the baby?" "It has everything to do with it," Detective Miller said, closing her folder. "Because we can't find Veronica. Her apartment is empty. Her phone goes straight to voicemail. And you, Margaret, are the only person who claims to have seen her yesterday." The implication was a bucket of ice water down my back. She thought I was lying. She thought I had found that baby some other way and was framing Veronica out of spite or grief-induced madness. "I didn't lie," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "I saw what I saw." "Then we need to find Veronica, because if she is that baby's mother, he could be in grave danger. And if she's not, we have a much bigger problem on our hands." Detective Miller stood and gave me her card. "If you remember anything else, you call me." She left me there, reeling, my own sanity now in question. Had I been wrong? Had my grief twisted my memory, making me see what I wanted to see? Reverend Michael returned around noon. "Let's pray," he suggested. I wasn't a deeply religious woman, but in that moment, I needed to believe in something bigger than myself. We prayed quietly, the familiar words a strange comfort. "The police think I'm lying," I told him when we finished. "The truth has a way of coming out, Margaret. It always does." But time was something that poor baby didn't have. He was fighting for his life, and somewhere out there, Veronica was gone. At 3 p.m., another doctor, an older woman with a kind but serious face, came to see me. "We need to run some tests on the baby, and we need your consent." "But I'm not his family." "We know. But you're the closest thing we have to a responsible party right now. Social services is on their way, but we can't wait. We need to screen him for genetic conditions, for exposure to drugs or alcohol. We need to know what we're dealing with." I signed the forms without reading them, My signature a shaky scrawl. 2 hours later, the social worker arrived. Her name was Sarah. She was young, too young for such a heavy job, with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mrs. Gable," she said, "I need to ask you some questions about your personal situation." The same story, the same questions, but Sarah looked at me with a detached pity that felt worse than Detective Miller's suspicion. "Do you live alone?" "Yes." "Do you have a steady income?" "My late husband's pension." "Any history of mental health issues? Depression, perhaps?" I hesitated. After David died, my doctor had put me on antidepressants for a few months. "I had some depression after my son died," I admitted. "But I'm fine now." She made a note on her tablet. "When the baby is ready for discharge," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "he will be placed in a temporary foster home while we investigate. He will be in the custody of the state." State custody. The words shattered what little composure I had left. That baby, who had fought his way back to life, was going to be handed over to strangers, to a system, to become just another case file. What if I took him? The words tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop them. Sarah looked surprised. Then her expression softened into one of professional skepticism. "Mrs. Gable, you're 63 years old. You're not a certified foster parent. You have no legal connection to this child. And you are a person of interest in an ongoing criminal investigation. I saved his life. I know you did. But the system has rules, procedures. The child's welfare is the primary concern. And frankly, your age and your recent bereavement are significant factors. It was like being told I was too old, too broken, too sad to be of any use. And maybe she was right. Maybe it was a crazy thought. But when I closed my eyes, all I could see was that tiny, perfect face. And I knew, with a certainty that shook me to my core, that no one in this world would love that baby the way I could. That night, for the first time in nearly 2 days, I went home. Sandra, the nurse, convinced me. She promised they would call if anything changed. I drove home as the sun bled across the horizon. I stopped the car at the riverbank, at the very spot where I'd seen Veronica, where I'd pulled that chest from the water. The chest was gone, taken by the police as evidence. But I could see my own footprints in the mud. I stood there as twilight fell, wondering if I was losing my mind. And then my phone buzzed. It was the hospital. My heart seized. "Mrs. Gable." It was Sandra's voice. "You need to come back, right now." I drove back to the hospital like a madwoman, my hands shaking on the wheel. My mind raced with the worst possible scenarios. The baby was gone. He had fought so hard, but it wasn't enough. I hadn't been fast enough. I ran through the emergency room doors. Sandra was waiting for me. Her face was grave, but there was something else in her eyes. Something I couldn't read. "He's alive," she said immediately, seeing the terror on my face. "The baby's alive. But you need to come with me." She led me down a series of quiet hallways, up an elevator to the 3rd floor, past the NICU. We stopped at a small, windowless conference room. Inside, Detective Miller was waiting, along with Sarah, the social worker, and a man in a suit I didn't recognize. "Please, have a seat," Detective Miller said. I sat, my legs feeling like they might give out. "We got the results of the baby's DNA test," she said, her voice flat. "DNA? Why had they done a DNA test?" "And?" I asked when the silence became unbearable. Detective Miller looked at the man in the suit. He gave a slight nod. She opened a folder and slid a paper across the table. "He's a boy, born approximately 2 days ago. And, Margaret, he's your grandson." The room tilted. The words made no sense. My grandson. Impossible. David died 7 months ago. He and Veronica didn't have any children. "That's impossible," I whispered. "The results are definitive," said the man in the suit. I'm Dr. Evans, a forensic geneticist. The baby shares a clear paternal link with your son, David, based on the DNA we have on file for him. David's son. My David. I felt the air rush out of my lungs. David had a son he never got to meet, a son that someone had tried to murder. But how? My voice was a stranger's. David's been gone for 7 months. Exactly, Detective Miller said, leaning forward. Veronica was pregnant at the time of the accident. Based on the baby's development, she became pregnant about 2 months before David's death, which means she knew. The world was spinning. Veronica knew she was carrying David's child when he died. Why didn't she tell me? Why hide it for all these months? Why give birth in secret and then— I don't understand, I said, tears finally spilling over. Why would she do this? He's her son. He's David's son. That's what we're trying to figure out, Detective Miller said. But there's more. We've reopened the investigation into your son's accident. There were things that didn't add up. What things? David's car was inspected after the crash. The report cited brake failure due to wet roads. But we had a specialist look at it again. He found evidence the brake lines had been deliberately cut. The word hung in the air like a ghost. Cut, sabotage, murder. My son hadn't died in an accident. He had been murdered. Veronica, I breathed. It wasn't a question. She is our primary suspect, Detective Miller confirmed. But we have to find her first. She's vanished without a trace. I stood up and walked to the window, my mind a storm of grief and rage. My son. My sweet boy. She killed him. I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. It was Sarah. There's something else, she said softly. About the baby. Now that we know you're his biological grandmother, you have legal standing. You can petition the court for custody. Before I could even speak, she held up a hand. But it will be a long and difficult process. There will be psychological evaluations, home studies. And in the meantime, the baby will have to remain in the care of the state. No, the word ripped from my throat. You are not taking him. He is all I have left of my son. He is my flesh and blood. I understand, Sarah said. But the law is the law. We have to ensure the child's safety above all else. He's safer with me than with anyone. Perhaps, but that's for a judge to decide. Dr. Evans spoke for the first time. We must also consider the baby's health. He's experienced a significant trauma. He will require specialized medical care for the foreseeable future. I'll do whatever it takes, I said, my voice filled with a resolve I didn't know I possessed. Anything. Margaret, Detective Miller said, I need you to think. Did Veronica ever mention a place she might go to hide? A distant relative? An old friend? I squeezed my eyes shut, searching my memory. Veronica was a closed book. She never spoke of her past. It was as if her life began the day she met David. She has a sister, I said suddenly. Somewhere in Arizona. David mentioned her once, said they weren't close. Detective Miller wrote it down. What's her name? I don't remember. David only mentioned her that one time. It's a start, she said. We'll find her. After they left, Sandra stayed with me. Do you want to see your grandson? She asked. I could only nod, my throat tight with emotion. She led me to the NICU, had me scrub my hands and put on a gown. And then she took me to a small incubator in the corner of the quiet, dimly lit room. And there he was, my grandson, David's son. So impossibly small, hooked up to a web of tubes and wires, but he was alive. He was fighting. He had David's thick, dark hair, David's stubborn chin. Can I touch him? I whispered. Yes, just for a moment. I reached my hand through a small porthole in the incubator and gently touched his tiny hand. It was so warm. His little fingers curled around my index finger. A reflex, I knew, but it felt like a promise. "Hello, little one," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I'm your grandma, and I promise you no one will ever hurt you again." Sandra put her hand on my shoulder. "He'll need a name. For the hospital records." David had always said if he had a son, he wanted to name him Leo. "Leo," I said, my voice thick with tears. "His name is Leo." I stayed by his incubator all night, holding his tiny hand through the opening, humming the lullaby I used to sing to David, making promises to a future I wasn't sure I could provide, but I would die trying. This baby wasn't just a stranger I'd found. He was my blood, all that was left of my murdered son. And I would not let anyone take him from me. The days that followed were a special kind of hell. I lived at the hospital, sleeping in the waiting room chair, spending every waking moment I was allowed beside Leo's incubator. And in between, I dealt with the bureaucracy. Lawyers, social workers, detectives, all asking questions, all holding my future and my grandsons in their hands. Sarah, the social worker, appeared on the third day with a mountain of paperwork. "You'll need a full criminal background check, a complete psychological evaluation, a physical exam, income verification, a home safety inspection, and you'll need to complete a certified infant care and CPR course." A course, as if I hadn't raised a child from infancy to manhood. But I bit my tongue and nodded, taking the stack of papers. "How long will this take?" "Best case scenario, 6 to 8 weeks. Could be longer." 8 weeks. Leo would be in a stranger's home for 2 months while I proved I was worthy of raising him. And what happens to him in the meantime? When he's discharged, he'll be placed with a licensed foster family. He'll be well cared for. You'll be allowed 2 supervised visits per week. Twice a week. Under supervision, as if I were a danger to him. That night I called Reverend Michael. I needed character references. I needed people to vouch for my sanity, my strength. He came to my house the next day. "Of course I'll help you, Margaret," he said. "You're one of the most capable women I've ever known. That little boy is blessed to have you." But I didn't feel blessed. I felt old and tired and scared. I was 63 years old. How would I keep up with a toddler? How would I help a teenager with his homework? "I'm too old for this," I said, the fear finally bubbling to the surface. Reverend Michael smiled gently. "Love doesn't keep a calendar, Margaret. Age is just a number." I wanted so desperately to believe him. The next day, Sandra showed me how to care for Leo, how to change his tiny diaper through the portholes of the incubator, how to hold him securely for the few minutes he was allowed out. My hands shook. I had forgotten how fragile they were. "You're a natural," Sandra encouraged, but it felt anything but natural. On the 5th day, Detective Miller came with an update. We found Veronica's sister in Phoenix. She said she hasn't spoken to Veronica in over a year. Said Veronica borrowed $5,000 and never paid it back. Money. It always came back to money. David was a successful architect. He had savings, a life insurance policy worth $500,000. Veronica was the sole beneficiary. "Did she collect the insurance money?" I asked. Detective Miller nodded grimly. 3 months ago, the full $500,000. A week after that, she wired the entire amount to an account in the Grand Cayman Islands. We're trying to trace it, but it's a ghost. $500,000. The price of my son's life. And she had it all. "But why the baby?" I asked, the question that haunted my every waking moment. "Why not just give him up for adoption?" Detective Miller was quiet for a long moment. "We think we know," she said finally. "We got a warrant for David's financial records. A week before he died, he amended his will. The air left my lungs. He left his entire estate, his half of the firm, his savings, everything, in a trust for his future children. He cut Veronica out completely, except for the life insurance, which he couldn't change. David knew. He knew she was pregnant. and he knew he couldn't trust her. He had tried to protect his son. She killed him for the insurance, I whispered in horror. And then she realized the rest of the money, the bigger share, would go to the baby. So she decided to get rid of him too. It's the only theory that fits. The sheer, calculated evil of it was staggering. She murdered my son, carried his baby for 7 more months, and then tried to dispose of him like he was trash. All for money. The weeks crawled by. Leo got stronger. The doctors called him their little fighter. One by one, the tubes came out. He began to breathe on his own, to feed from a bottle. His cry was no longer a weak mule, but a strong, healthy wail. He was a miracle. I finished the mountain of paperwork. The background check was clean. The doctor declared me healthy. The psychological evaluation was grueling. A woman half my age asked me invasive questions for hours. How do you really feel about Veronica? Are you trying to replace your son with this baby? I'm not replacing anyone, I told her, my voice steely. I am protecting my grandson. The home inspection was humiliating. 2 women went through my house with a checklist, pointing out all the ways it was unsafe for a child. I spent over $1,000 I didn't have on a new crib, a changing table, safety gates, and cabinet locks. The infant care class was the final indignity. I sat in a room full of glowing young expectant mothers. The 20-something instructor spoke to me with patronizing slowness. Now, it's very important to support the baby's head. I just nodded and took notes, biting back the urge to scream that I had done this before, that I knew what I was doing. 6 weeks after I pulled Leo from the river, Sarah, the social worker, met me at the hospital. You've met all the requirements, she said with a small professional smile. The judge will hear your case for temporary custody next week. 1 week. I could finally bring my grandson home. But that night, as I sat by Leo's crib, watching him sleep, my phone rang. It was Detective Miller. Her voice was urgent. Margaret, you need to come down to the station. We found something in David's personal effects. Something you need to see. I drove to the station, my stomach in knots. Detective Miller led me to an evidence room. On a metal table was a box containing the things they'd recovered from David's car: his wallet, his keys, his shattered smartphone. Our tech guys finally managed to recover the data from his phone, she said. She handed me a stack of papers. They were printouts of text messages between David and Veronica, from the week he died. I read the first one. It was from David. I know you're pregnant, V. We need to talk. Her reply, I don't know what you're talking about. David, again. I found the test in the trash. Why wouldn't you tell me? A long pause, then Veronica. I was going to. I was just scared. Scared of what? This is amazing news. Then, the message that made my blood run cold. I don't want it, David. I kept reading, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the papers. David pleaded with her. He told her they could do it together, that I would help. Her replies grew colder, more cruel. This baby will ruin my life. It's a mistake. Then I got to the last exchange, from the day before he died. David. I talked to a lawyer today, V, and I changed my will. Everything is going to our child. I won't let you throw this away. Veronica's reply was a single chilling sentence. You will regret this. The next day, my son was dead. I dropped the papers, a sob catching in my throat. She killed him, I whispered. She killed him because he was going to protect his son. That's what we believe, Detective Miller said softly. And we have more. We subpoenaed her phone records. The day she sent that text, she made 2 calls to a man named Frank Miller, a mechanic with a history of gambling debts. We brought him in. He folded. He confessed that Veronica paid him $3,000 to tamper with David's brakes. She had hired a man to murder my son. We have a warrant for her arrest for first-degree murder and attempted murder of a minor, Detective Miller said. But we still don't have her. She's a ghost. I went back to the hospital that night and just held Leo's hand, watching him sleep, so innocent of the storm that raged around him. Your daddy was a hero, I whispered to him. He died for you, and I'm going to live for you. I promise. The court hearing was a blur. I wore the same black dress I'd worn to David's funeral. The judge was an older woman with kind eyes. She reviewed the thick file, the police reports, the evaluations. Mrs. Gable, she said, looking over her glasses at me, this is a highly unusual and tragic case. But it is clear to this court that this child's best interests are served by being with his grandmother, the woman who saved his life. She banged the gavel. Temporary custody is granted to Margaret Gable, pending a 6-month review for permanent adoption. I cried. I sat in that courtroom and cried with relief, with grief, with a terrifying, overwhelming love. 3 days later, I took my grandson home. For the next 6 months, my life revolved around Leo. The sleepless nights were harder at 63 than they had been at 30, but the moments of joy were infinitely sweeter. His first smile, the way he'd grab my finger with his whole tiny hand. Every day I fell more in love with him. I turned David's old bedroom into a nursery. It was a painful, bittersweet task, packing away my son's life to make room for his son's future. One night, while sorting through a box of David's old college books, I found it. A worn, leather-bound journal tucked away at the bottom. I never knew he kept one. I opened it. Most of it was just notes from his architecture classes. But then I found the entries from the last year of his life. He wrote about meeting Veronica, about being enchanted by her. But then, the entries started to change. I feel like I don't really know her. She never talks about her past. It's like she has no history. And then, the entry that confirmed everything. I found out V is pregnant. I'm going to be a father. But she doesn't want the baby. She says it will ruin her life. How can a baby ruin a life? I'm changing my will tomorrow. I have to protect this child. I don't trust her. And the final entry, from the day he died. V threatened me. She said I'll regret it. I'm scared. I'm going to call Mom tomorrow. I need her help. He never got to make that call. I took the journal to Detective Miller. This is the nail in her coffin, she said. When we find her. 2 months after I brought Leo home, my phone rang. An unknown number. Margaret. It was her, Veronica. My blood ran cold. Where are you? That doesn't matter. What matters is you have something I want. You have nothing I want. I have my son. You tried to murder him. It was a mistake. I was suffering from postpartum psychosis. I wasn't in my right mind. But I'm better now. I want my baby. Never. Listen to me. Bring me Leo, and bring me the $500,000 from David's estate that's being held in trust. If you do, I'll disappear. If you don't, I will come back. And I will get him. A jury will believe a grieving young mother over a crazy old woman every time. I put the phone on speaker and hit record on my cell. How do I know you won't just hurt us? You don't. The old lumber mill by the creek. Midnight tomorrow. Come alone. The line went dead. I immediately called Detective Miller and sent her the recording. This is it, she said. We've got her. We're setting a trap. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. A trusted neighbor, a retired police officer, took Leo to his house for the night. It tore my heart out to let him go, but I knew he had to be safe. That night, Detective Miller and her team fitted me with a wire. You just keep her talking, she said. We'll be all around you. She's not getting away. At midnight, I walked into the dark, cavernous lumber mill. The air was thick with the smell of sawdust and decay. Veronica, I called out. She stepped out from behind a stack of rotting timber. She looked different, thinner, her hair dyed a brassy blonde, but her eyes were the same, cold and empty. Did you bring him? First, you tell me why. Why did you kill my son?" She laughed, a sound with no warmth in it. "He was a fool. He was going to ruin everything with that baby. I had a plan. The insurance money was just the start. His estate was worth millions. But he wrote me out. So I had to get rid of the problem. Both of them." It was a full confession. I knew they had it. I knew they were listening. "Where is the baby?" she demanded, and that's when I saw the gun in her hand. "He's not here," I said, my voice steady. Her face contorted with rage. "You stupid old woman." I pressed the panic button on the wire inside my coat. Once, twice, 3 times. She raised the gun. Everything slowed down. I saw the flash from the barrel, heard the deafening crack, and felt a searing pain in my shoulder as I was thrown backward. Then, the world exploded. Doors burst open, blinding lights flooded the mill. "Police! Drop the weapon!" I saw them swarm her, tackle her to the ground. It was over. I woke up in a hospital bed. The bullet had gone clean through my shoulder. "Lucky," the doctor said. "A few inches over, and it would have been my heart." Detective Miller came to see me. "She's been charged with everything. Murder, attempted murder. The list goes on. She'll never see the outside of a prison again. Her confession on the wire was perfect." 6 months later, I stood before the same judge. This time there were no questions, no evaluations. She looked at me and smiled. "Mrs. Gable, it is with great pleasure that I grant you full and permanent custody of your grandson, Leo. This court also grants your petition for adoption." I walked out of that courthouse with my son, my legal son, Leo. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were filled with a love so fierce it healed every scar. I told him all about his father, what a brave and wonderful man he was. He deserved to know he came from love, not from darkness. On his 5th birthday, we had a party in the backyard. As I watched him run around with his friends, his face bright with laughter, I thought about that day at the river. How close I came to losing him before I even knew him. My neighbor, the retired cop, sat beside me on the porch. "You're a hero, Margaret." "I'm not a hero," I said, watching my beautiful boy. "I'm just a grandma." "Maybe you would have given up. Maybe you would have thought you were too old, too tired. Or maybe you would have done the exact same thing. Because that's what love does. It makes you fight. It makes you hope. It makes you stronger than you ever thought possible. If my story touched your heart today, please come back tomorrow for another. I share a new one every single day, so make sure to follow and click that little bell so you don't miss it. And if you'd like to hear another story that will keep you on the edge of your seat, just click on one of the videos you see on the screen now.